Welcome back, everybody, for another concussion sub series. A very happy new year to everyone, and hope you had a fantastic 2021 start. And believe it or not, we are going to have a rocking start to our new year with our guest today. First things first, we have two concussion subs today, Akash and Sanjay. All of you know both of them. We are absolutely pumped for this new year. Our guest today has been with ESPN Cricinfo since 2013, runs the show called Match Point, which specializes in audio video features as well as daily news and series analysis. He was lucky enough to hang out with our role model. We will get to it in a bit. He covers several high traction series. He was part of Sachin Tendulkar farewell in 2013. He covered the World T20 when West Indies won in 2014. And believe it or not, he's a qualified lawyer. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Raunak Kapoor. Welcome to the show, Raunak.
Thank you so much, Suman. That's very detailed and very flattering intro. I'm very impressed with the name of the show, Concussion Sub. So I'd like to ask you guys what went into that name, and is the guest also considered part of the Concussion Subs?
No, not really. So the thought process was fairly simple. When Jadeja was concussed and Chahal came up, our group was full of conversations and everybody had an
Yeah.
opinion. So that's drove us to start a concussion sub series. As simple as that. Just for fun.
Okay. Brilliant. Brilliant. Happy New Year to all of you, and it's my pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Thanks again. All right, let's jump right in. So couple of different ways we are going to cover this, Ronak. First things first, lawyer to a broadcaster, about your cricketing journey. Talk to us about how this evolved, and also we have in our group a lot of budding bloggers and want to be broadcasters. So help us through the journey. How did you go about, and where you are today? How did this all happen?
Yeah, I guess, when you do what I end up doing, and there's no fixed paths to get there, right? If you want to become a broadcaster or a presenter in sport, there's no school of sports broadcasting that you can go to, a degree that you can attain to eventually become Harsha Bhogle, or someone in that league. Everyone gets there by accident. Everyone knows Harsha's story. He's a former management graduate, former chemical engineer, and then stumbled upon this. My journey, in some ways, is actually similar to his because while I was studying at GLC at Government Law College, Mumbai, the All India Radio Mumbai station is no more than a kilometer or so away from there. And the world knows that Harsha started with radio. As it turns out, so did I. And it came at a time when I thank my law college and the administration of the government college at the time because they didn't have any requirement to attend lectures when I was attending college. So that gives you the leeway and liberty to do all sorts of things. And cricket buffs like me tend to just take a chance. As do all of you. You guys are in banking, and you still take a chance. You make sure that your passion isn't withering away. In some side corner of the house, you guys do these podcasts, these video casts, and make sure that your currency with the game remains fresh. So in that regard, I once heard an India Bangladesh commentary game on All India Radio, and I thought the quality of commentary was pretty poor. Right? If some of you have been listening to All India Radio, you would know that it's not the best of commentary. So I just had a slight kick, right? A kida in me, if you want to use local lingo, to say, yeah, All India Radio is right here. Let's go and speak to someone and tell them, yeah, what is this commentary? And I mean, there are hardly any people listening to commentary and radio in India anyway. On top of that, you put out this sort of garbage. So let's go and speak to someone. And I actually just went with that complete, impromptu sort of plan. And I happened to meet a woman who was in charge of the sports section, who was also in charge of the English content at All India Radio. And I just blurted it out. It came with no real thought. She said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Ma'am, I've been listening to radio commentary for a long time. I heard the India Bangladesh commentary last night. I thought it was terrible." And I didn't want to say terrible, but it just came out. And she started laughing. So, to my great surprise and good fortune, she didn't tell me to get out. Who are you people? Get out of my office. She literally laughed. She says, "Yeah, I know our commentary has been on the way down for a while now. Why don't you sit?" And she ordered me a cup of tea, which we had to pay for at All India Radio. But she was nice enough to pay for herself. And we started chit chatting. And I just said, "Man, why don't you guys get out, get some fresh talent and whatnot? I don't have a degree in media or broadcasting, but I she said, you don't need to have a degree to do this, right? There are people who have degrees in media that aren't good enough to do it, and there are people that don't have degrees in the field that are good enough. Talking to you for the last 10 minutes, I get that you're keen on the sport. You clearly have the skill set to be on broadcast. So, if you're up for it, I'll give you a few things, whatever I can do. So I was like, yeah, why not? We spoke for 45 minutes. She gave me a little bit of news reading to do. The process to become a commentator at All India Radio was a little longer, but I went through that process thanks to her backing, guidance, and I became a national listed commentator pretty soon. I do that for tennis and for cricket till date. So I've been doing radio commentary at AIR for what 6 years now. So that came just after my time with well, after my law was completed and after I joined Cricket for. So if I look back at it now, I would just say, you take a chance, right? There was no fixed outcome. There was no guarantee. I didn't know this lady. I had no references, no backing. She didn't know me. It was just that I met someone in the right position who was open-minded enough to say, yeah, let's give this guy a go. And I think that's essentially the kind of luck that you need to hope goes your way. And I found that not only at All India Radio, but also at ESPN when I first wrote to Sambit Bal, the editor-in-chief. I actually wrote to him of a Facebook message. And funny enough, he replied that Sambit Bal is notorious in our organization of ignoring and forget and miss, completely missing the most important emails. But somehow he happened to see my Facebook message and said, okay, come see me. And again, a man I didn't know, had no real connection to or reference with, just sort of had a chat and said, all right, let's give you a go. So it just tells me that there are good people in the world, people that are willing to give talent a go. And if you take your chances, you may luck out. There are those that keep trying and they never get it right. There are those that never try out of fear of whatever, failure, rejection, whatever it may be. So my only advice to anyone who wants to do this is take a chance. Who knows? Someone might be watching this tomorrow and may say, all right, maybe Suman or AJ or Sanjay, let's get some of them to do some reporting for us. Let's get them to do some, you guys are based in parts of the world where now in the new world we may not want to send and fly reporters to. Maybe that's the way to go about it. So like I said, these things luck out. I am very fortunate to have been able to make a livelihood out of it, not just a hobby that pays once in a while. And yeah, that's essentially the story. I never practiced law, as it turns out, because the job from ESPN came before I completed my LLB, and I guess we've not looked back since. So that's how it went. Complete luck by chance, right place, right time. But then again, that's how most of these stories turn out.
That's a great story, and thanks for sharing. And believe it or not, the way we are talking to you today was also the same way you explained. I reached out to you
Hmm.
on Twitter and luckily saw you
Yeah.
responding. It was like thrilled. And Akash,
So that's any message on social media is a very close place in my heart. Like I said, if anyone writes to me on social media, I at least respond. If they tell me I really want to do this, can you get me a reference? I'll at least ask them, okay, mail me your CV. I'll forward it to the right people. Anything on those lines, I'm happy to respond with because I know that's how I got a response. And I can imagine the hundreds of people, the thousands of people, even when I was growing up, way before the boom of Twitter and Insta, there weren't too many ways that you could reach out to people. I couldn't just tweet to a Harsha Bogle or an Alan Wilkins or a John Dykes or whoever your iconic presenters, broadcasters are, and say, "Can you help me out?" There wasn't a method. There wasn't a medium. Now there is a medium, but it's a bit crowded. So for me, I totally sympathize what it would have been at the receiving end of it. So I do my best to at least respond to as many messages. I'm not saying I can respond to all of them, but I do what I can to at least respond to people who write to me of social media.
thank you for that. Okay, switching to next topic. So, if cricketers come on shows, people are saying, "Okay, you remember your debut match? What was it all
Hmm.
about?" So, talk to us about your first stint with ESPN Cricket
Oh,
Info and
yeah.
the most latest stint. So, compare both of them and tell us what difference in
Oh,
terms of your confidence levels.
that's. I mean, it's massive. So, as it turns out, now, if you now look at the world we live in, they're both fairly limited productions. If you think of it, we don't have the toys and the big cameras and the big broadcasts anymore because everything's changed in a post-COVID world. But as it turns out, in 2013, when I did my first gig with Cricket Info, it was to commemorate 20 years of Cricket Info, right? And so it started in 1993. This was 2013. So they decided they wanted to do something live on video for the first time, which Cricket Info had never done before that. And they decided at that time Google Hangouts had just come up. They were the thing, right? And they said we're going to do a Google Hangout with Rahul Dravid, which is going to be called a day with Dravid. and we'll get 9 or 10 fans from all over the world to tune in. So it's almost a similar setup. Right now, it sounds so simple. You want to do it, you just do a Zoom call and done. It's over. But back then, there weren't too many avenues. No one had tested it. But we said, no, we'll try this. So we wanted an anchor in studio with Rahul. And it was also more like my audition. And I was like, wow, Rahul Dravid in an audition. I'll problem at all. So I was sent to Bangalore, and I genuinely thought that this was like a massive moment for me, right? I was like, oh my God, imagine just meeting Rahul Dravid suddenly after years of having watched him. And that too, of all the people in the world meeting Dravid, a guy who you can't help but worship for many reasons well beyond cricket. So I thought this is going to be impossible. I'm going to totally fanboy over him. But TK, what I decided was I'll make sure that my nerves are calmed when I meet Rahul at least 15, 20 minutes before we start the recording. I'll get that, I'll pinch myself and get the stardom out of my way. As it turns out, that day was full of chaos, full of commotion. Nobody had a clue of what we wanted to do and how we wanted to go about it. We upturned a conference room into a studio. We didn't have any production toys. I had no IFB, no producer in my ear. There's a camera person in front of me. There was a crowd on the side of me. There was a small flex backdrop behind me, and all sorts of things that were tested, nothing. So they told me to sit here because we need to keep framing and checking. And that took forever. In the meantime, Rahul Dravid has entered and the Bangalore office has gone crazy because it's in Bangalore. So Rahul would be great anyway, but in Bangalore, he is, Rajnikant Tendulkar equivalent. So here you have all sorts of chaos. And I just haven't gotten to meet him. Eventually, we were supposed to go live at about noon. And at 11:55 or 56, Dravid is brought into the room and stationed on the chair next to me. And he's also looking around. Somebody's miking him up. And I'm trying to get the words out of me. Like, hi Rahul, I'm Raunak. Nice to meet you. It's an absolute pleasure. Nothing's coming out. I'm just looking at him like, I don't know. I'm trying to get the words out. It's not bloody happening. And I've managed to finally just say, Rahul, hi Rahul. Rahul, I'm Raunak. And he turned like, oh, hi, hi, hi. And I said, I'll be hosting. He said, okay, okay. So that's all we spoke. And I quickly turned before I could say anything more to him, like familiarize him with the concept. I have my producer just going, I said, what? So I just started. So it taught me a bit of a lesson in that sense that you can plan as much as you want, but at the end of the day, you've just got to be able to call it go with the flow, call it think on your feet. In that line, somehow the words came to me. Rahul was brilliant, and Rahul Dravid remains brilliant to this day. I did a series of Insta lives in the lockdown. I don't know if any of you managed to catch that. He was my first guest on Insta. And Rahul Dravid's not on social media, and he has no idea how to operate a smartphone. Yet he took the trouble of doing this for me, and it was a technical disaster. I couldn't get him to get the audio video right. Somehow, I managed to turn this laptop that you're watching me on into a Skype window and got his video through my window of the Insta Live and the audio through his window of the Insta Live. And I asked him for 10 minutes. It ended up going on for about 35 minutes, and he was a star. He didn't complain. He didn't throw a tantrum. He just that's the other thing you learn, right? That some of the biggest names, the greatest names, they're not great because of how they played. It doesn't matter whether Dravid would have scored 10 or 11 or 12 or 13,000 runs. He could have scored 6,000. He could have scored 5. It didn't matter. What makes him great is stuff like this. And for me, that's my biggest learning in say 6 or 7 years. I've been very lucky to work with some terrific people, terrific cricketers, of course. There are many of those, but some great guys, and I've had the good fortune of working with a number of them. So that was the first memory of sort of working with cricket for. And as far as the most recent goes, I mean, now it's like a well-oiled machine. It rolls easy. Like I said, we've transformed our way of producing content. Suddenly, you don't need a studio with a producer, director, switcher, makeup artist, cameraman, lightman. Suddenly, what 15 people were doing till last year, 3 or 4 people remotely in their house can do. Suddenly, a cricketer that you're paying in the six figures to come and spend a whole day in studio, you're paying a fifth or a fourth and a quarter of that sitting at home. And you can get them from anywhere. You don't need to fly them down business class, put them up at a hotel. So that just tells you a little bit about how the nuances of broadcasting has changed over time. And I see that staying perhaps for a little while at least, because people are happy to consume content like this. It doesn't matter if your guest is in studio physically with you or joining off a link, some of like this. So I guess that's something to watch out for now going forward. But yeah, in a nutshell, that's the story. In between, in those 6 or 7 years, I've had the best of studios, the best of locations, the best of backdrops, the best of guests, and it's been a thoroughly rewarding experience. So, yeah, that's pretty much it.
It's an excellent story, Ronak. And did you get any chance to go through to live matches and broadcast from the ground, or you've always been
Yeah,
on studio?
sure. No, so when I do radio, uh, AIR recently picked up terrestrial radio rights for BCCI cricket, India cricket. So the first ever test match that I did was, I mean, I've done a lot of off-tube commentary, which is from the Delhi studios of AIR, live commentary for radio. But the first live gig that I got was for the India South Africa test in Pune last year, which happened to be Virat Kohli's, I think, best highest test score. So that was the first live game that I did. I've done a T20 against the West Indies in Hyderabad, which was terrific. Again, it was the first T20, went right down to the wire, and that happened to be Virat Kohli's highest T20 high score.
Wow.
So I think I'm lucky for Virat Kohli. I mean, most people would be. Um, and as far as the games itself go, I mean, I did the 2015 World Cup from Sydney. We had a beautiful setup. I got to go to a couple of games there. While the studio was Sydney, it wasn't at the ground, but I did manage to catch a couple of games there. 2017, I went to South Africa for the test series there, which was again terrific to watch three tests in South Africa. We weren't doing commentary, but we were reporting from the ground. So that was terrific too. So yes, there's not been as much travel, but I'm very happy in the comfort of a studio, which now happens to be at home. You know, the studio's been set up at home. So other than me charging ESPN rent for using my premises as a studio, everything else is pretty acceptable. So yeah, so it's a great experience to do live sport at a ground, no matter what sport. I've been fortunate to do some tennis for AIR, and I did the Davis Cup between India and Spain in 2016 when Nadal was part of the Spain contingent. So to do a little commentary on a Nadal game would be a thing ticked off. Not too many Indians would get the chance and the privilege of, in whatever way, in whatever medium, commenting on or commentating on a game which features arguably one of the best players that ever held the tennis racket. So yes, these are little milestones that I'm very fortunate to have, gotten in what just my first 6 or 7 years in the business. So.
Very good. And speaking of being in the spot of limelight, so of course you have privilege of talking to tons of cricketers and commentators during your show. Um,
Yep.
lot of folks have strong opinions on the show, which we have been following through. And I'm a big fan of Sanjay Manjrekar. I'm in touch with him on DM on Twitter. He responds to me, and I love it. And
Yeah,
Gautam Gambhir.
he always comes up in my interactions as well somehow. That's how that's how deep our bond is. And all of a sudden, whenever I'm doing any of these shows, Sanjay's reference will always come up. But yeah, go for it. Tell me.
Excellent. Yeah, and even Gambhir, off late, Gambhir's insights are fantastic. He's great. Um, so, are these folks or kind of folks misunderstood because of their strong
Yeah.
opinions? What's your view there?
I think strong opinions in general will stand out in this day and age, wouldn't they? Because there is too much of the other kind, and that's not just in cricket. It's in almost every sphere. Everyone's so worried about outrage or upsetting the wrong people or people in high positions of power, and I think that's a pandemic on its own, right? People not willing to speak openly and honestly about what they feel. If you actually look back at and listen into commentary over the years, from the 80s to the 90s to the 2000s, early 2000s, and you actually listen to what commentators have said about the greatest of players, be it Ponting, be it Waugh, be it Vaughan, be it Tendulkar, Gavaskar, Richards, commentators have been just, they've called the game, and no one was outraged by it. The amount of times you can look back now. I mean, you guys, we are pretty much the same age. We would have watched Tendulkar, Dravid, Lakshman, Ganguly at their prime and their peak, and there were all sorts of conversations about at times when their fitness wasn't up to the mark, when they played poor shots, when they led poorly. All of that was normal cricket conversation. It was never directed towards any personal assault on anybody. But back then, you didn't have a barrage of people getting angry and outraged on behalf of those cricketers, which you have today. So today, if I say Virat Kohli led poorly in this game, or he had a bad day as captain, or if I say that MS Dhoni is clearly done, and he's the CSK team would be better off if they look beyond him, all of a sudden maybe Dhoni won't find that as an odd comment, or Kohli may or may not find that as odd comment. But you have far too many people that will take outrage on their behalf. What that does is it actually triggers a reaction. Suddenly, there are cricketers that are influenced by it. Even if Ravindra Jadeja doesn't take offense to bits and pieces, maybe there are people on behalf of him that say, look, this is what he's called you. He's berated you as a cricketer. And maybe Jadeja, in some influence of that social media, has reacted to Sanjay. And what's been a common cricketing reference or term to describe an all-rounder that isn't a proper all-rounder with both departments. Kumar Sangakkara has used it to describe Russell Arnold and Jeevan Mendes. There have been n commentators that have used it to describe players of stronger at one skill or maybe not as strong in both skills as say a proper all-rounder like a Botham or a Stokes or whoever. So my point is the problem with people is they are prone to outrage, and that tends to lead into voices being curbed, voices being forced to toe the line, because it's not like you're just afraid of some Twitter troll. There is a reaction to that because there may be a broadcaster or somebody in a network that is affected by it and wants to sack you. And if they want to sack you, that's essentially affecting your livelihood. And if it's affecting your livelihood, then you are forced to toe the line. So it's a very direct problem, and therefore, I sympathize with those that face this sort of abuse, because at worst, Sanjay Manjrekar's only problem is that he happens to have gotten that he may have gotten a cricketing point wrong. Maybe his observations are incorrect. That's not a crime, right? Till date, Michael Holding doesn't rate T20 cricket. Everyone knows that. So is Michael Holding guilty of some real blasphemous views that he should never be given the mic again? Of course not. It's his view. He doesn't like it. So till date, there would be those that would have, of the older schools, that would have views that wouldn't stand good till today. And uh, people like Gautam, people like Sanjay, they are a breath of fresh air in an environment where far too many people are willing to just say things that are already known. uh, Gautam also carries the baggage of having a on-field altercation with Virat Kohli, and therefore people believe, oh, is he biased? Does he have an agenda? But let's take away who said it. Take the point. And if I don't tell you Gautam Gambhir said it, and I say somebody said that any other franchise, if it had the results that RCB would have had, they would have changed their captain over 8 years. That's not a inconceivable point. That's a very normal point. But when Gambhir says it, it's all of a sudden, oh, Gautam has a problem with Virat Kohli. So this is what Ricky Gervais says in his Netflix special Humanity, where he said it's not about what the argument is, it's about who's saying it and are they on our side. And our side is, oh, we love Virat Kohli and Gambhir has a problem with him, and therefore his argument is crap. So that's what I would submit is the problem for these people. If you have a problem with them, you essentially at worst have a problem with the argument that they're making. But for the vicious trolling and abusing that they're subject to, especially Sanjay, I just think that's bizarre. And I think that's an insecurity from people on social media to not be able to counter that argument. Every time someone attacks a player for his own stats or his own career is the worst form of retort you can have. And I know Akash Chopra is at the receiving end of it. Sometimes even cricketers stoop to that level. Oh, look at my numbers and look at your numbers. I've played 100 tests, you played 20 tests, so I'm 5 times the player as you. That's nonsense. That's absolute rubbish. In that, if that was the case, then other than Tendulkar, Shane Warne, and Ricky Ponting, nobody should comment on the game. There should be no opinions, because unless you've scored 30,000 runs and taken say 800, 900 wickets, nobody has the right to comment, which is absolute bullshit. So that is the problem of the world we live in. And what I'm disappointed with is that far too many cricketers stay silent on it, current and former. If more cricketers speak out, if I did an Insta live with Irfan Pathan where we discussed this, he said, give people security. Tell commentators what you're saying will never be held against you when it comes to your job performance, right? And therefore, you give them. If you happen to open up against a cricketer and that cricketer doesn't like it, it's okay. It's that simple. Kerry Packer, when he ran Channel 9, had no problem if commentators were just calling the game and going after a player. If someone rang up Kerry Packer and said, this guy has just criticized the Australian captain, Ian Chappell just criticized the Australian captain, please sack him, Kerry Packer would have just told him to cough. That's it. It's that simple. Not said, okay, yes, sir, I need to remove this man from commentary immediately. So that environment needs to change. When that environment changes, Gambhir and Manjrekar will not stand out.
Absolutely love it. And I also like the way Manjrekar handles the situation. I mean, yeah, it is harsh, a lot of comments, but he makes it a point that he's not stooping down to their level, as you rightly mentioned. He responds, he acknowledges. and sometimes he makes it a point and moves on, which is great. Akash?
Sure. Thank you so much, Raunak, for that. I mean, I've come across such situations as well, wherein Harsha Bhogle expressed his view regarding the former cricketers versus the current cricketers, and he got bad reviews for that. But that wasn't right in any case. It was his personal
Yeah,
opinion.
I mean, imagine if Harsha is at the receiving end of abuse. You think Harsha is one of the most likable people there is. In fact, he rarely gets into an issue which will stir up either side. Right? He'll give you a balanced view more often than not. And yet, if you will find people like Harsha at the receiving end of this abuse. So no one is free from it. So
Correct.
that's not a problem with the people. That's a problem with the platform. That's a problem with the environment that we've currently cultivated and fostered, where people are just having a go for no rhyme or reason. I'm not saying that at times a cricketer or former cricketer gets the point wrong, but yeah, that's his only crime. He's got an observation wrong. That's all, and that is his observation. You counter it with your own. To go after them, to make it about personal abuse, I mean, the levels to which these people are trolled and abused is ridiculous. So that is something that we all need to take stock of, and hopefully that will change somehow.
Definitely. Let's take one question from our Waadaplaya group actually here. We've seen cricketers, prepare themselves for different formats of the game, how they handle the situations. Similarly, you guys and the other broadcasters, how do you guys prepare? How do you guys analyze these data, and how do you get ready for different shows which have Mute Me, Fantasy Picks, previews, and post previews?
Yeah, you're watching some of my current content. Good, that's nice. That tells us that at least there are still people watching stuff that we put out. I guess the only thing I would say to this is uh, you guys would relate that anyone who does what I do is very privileged to do it, right? They're very lucky to do it, to be able to watch cricket for a living and talk about cricket for a living. I mean, there are those that would give up many things to have those jobs. And the fact that it still pays well. It's not even like you have to sacrifice a lot to do this. It's not a struggle anymore. And I'll be the first to admit it because I've been very fortunate to work at a company like ESPN. Uh, so what you ought to do is then just take the job seriously because it's already fun, right? So don't take it lightly. And that's that I would expect out of anyone in this profession, whether they're a former cricketer or not. It is all the more incumbent upon a non-cricketer because he will always have the added pressure or insecurity to keep establishing or re-establishing his credibility. Even today, Harsha is at the receiving end of pot shots of whether he's played enough cricket or not, right? Uh, and therefore, even when I'm speaking on a show, if I'm talking to three former Test cricketers, and maybe some irrelevant of how much they've played, but if I'm making a point and I want to engage them in a discussion, even if I want to disagree with them, I should have the credibility which will only come through following the game. So, firstly, following the game, watching as much cricket. Secondly, doing full justice to the literature around cricket, reading as much, finding different opinions. There's actually, cricket is such a fascinating sport. It's unique, right? There is no single sport that commands the kind of layered interest as cricket does. The reason Cricinfo exists as a single sport website and still succeeds, and not just Cricinfo, there are competitors that have done it as well. Uh, the reason such websites exist to focus on one sport with so many different dimensions and is still successful is because cricket is unique. You will not find a purely baseball website, a purely football website with these sorts of numbers. Yes, that has a lot to do with the subcontinent's following, but the fact remains that there is a huge enough audience for it. So it will also trigger a lot of different opinion. You will have cricketers in different parts of the world, right? Writers in different parts of the world, right? And I think your job as a broadcaster is to stay as current and as well versed with it so that when you bring out that information, you sound like someone who's enhancing the experience of the viewer. When I grew up listening to commentary, my education in cricket came from commentary. If I heard Tony Gregg say it, if I heard Tony Cozier say it, if I heard Sunil Gavaskar say it, then I would think, this is how it is. This is right, this is wrong. We must catch like this, not like this. You can find all sorts of ways to educate yourself. Then later you learn, okay, maybe there are different views to this. You know that if play with the straight bat, you know that seam, what is seam up and what is cross seam. So all this comes through the education. Who are they saying it for? Are those cricketers saying it for other cricketers? Of course not. They're saying it for us. So the job of a broadcaster is to enhance the experience of and educate the viewer that's listening. And I find that to be my role as well. So every time we do this, it's about putting out information. Nobody ever questioned Tony Cozier's place in the broadcasting seat for so many years because Tony Cozier was an ocean of knowledge. He was in every sense encyclopedia on West Indies cricket, a historian who understood the dynamics of the game. And when he spoke about cricket, he spoke about cricket, and therefore I take that, in my own way. Whenever we get the chance to do a show, you have to always make sure that you have your bases covered. Otherwise, what's the point? You're abusing this privilege that you've been given of watching cricket for a living.